Audience cannot see Rajesh because his back is towards the audience. So our deaf interpreter Deepak will see what Rajesh is signing and then relay it to the deaf audience. We have two interpreters.
Yeah, thank you for this. Thank you, Niharika, for helping us put this together. It's really unique.
The girl's father had to have a surgery. Don't we have organizations who can give interpreters?
And it's not...
Who can give sign language interpretation? Like, it would be... People have family who can do sign language. Some people don't.
It's a very good question. Thank you for asking. We don't have enough accessibility in India. We do face these challenges everywhere. We don't have enough interpreters provided on these settings. So that's something we are working on, right? Like we are advocating for interpreters being available in these spaces, public spaces, medical environment, all of that. Because there are millions of deaf people. Take a guess how much interpreters are there actively interpreting in India? Because deaf community is huge, it's million, right? There's only 300 active interpreters in India. And now ISLRTC, Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center, are having this course. People are learning, but it's a big dream to have interpreters in every single setting. But we are making our strides to there. I hope I answered your question. Hadip says that I'd just like to add. So the Rights of People with Disabilities Act 2016 that mentions that we should have access to interpreters in these settings, like police station, legal environment, medical environment. We do have the act, but we don't have enough people. And we don't have enough movement happening in this space so that the act are acted upon. So long way to go, we're still fighting for that. So yeah, just adding to Hadip's points, Rights of People with Disabilities Act, not many people even know that, right? Like, oh, we have interpreters, oh, this is good. No, this is a right. So deaf people don't have, the first language is English, like, or any spoken language, right? So RPGW Act is great, but not even deaf people are aware about that. So we have to even educate the deaf community of explaining what their right is. So that's something we're also working on.
This is a really unique experience for me. I've moderated hundreds of talks, but this is the first time I'm doing it with sign language, and this is one thing I learned, that we need to keep the field of vision clear. So what we're going to talk about is the politics of language, of hearing, listening and speech. And this is what Niharika's film has so beautifully brought out. What are the kinds of expressions we need to be able to understand one another, to be able to be heard, and to be able to speak and express ourselves?
So I have two questions. My first question is a little bit of a sillier question, but like as in the documentary, it was mentioned there's many different sign languages, Indian Sign Language, American Sign Language, sign languages from different countries. Just like when some people are speaking languages here in India, it's very cosmopolitan. You'll get Hinglish sometimes, for example, people mixing Hindi and English. Does the same thing happen in sign languages? Do people mix sign languages? And then, should I ask my second question as well right now? Okay, so my second question has to do with the evolution of language, and as new terms are being introduced, for example, within queerness and fluidity, we now have terms like non-binary and pansexual, or just new terms that are coming out and evolving as language evolves. And I'm really curious as to the process of evolution within sign languages, how it comes to be accepted by the community and terms come to be a part of the dictionary that way.
Spoken languages are so many different languages, right? We have Hindi, English, French, all of these many spoken languages. And sign language is a visual language, just like a spoken language. And for a hearing person to express, to communicate, they use a lot of spoken languages. And for a deaf person, they use sign language. And just like how there are a lot of spoken languages in the world, we also have different sign languages. In India is ISL standard across India, 70% of it is, but there are also regional variations, dialects to it. This is Manju speaking. So to answer your question about terminologies related to LGBTQIA community, do we have a ISL equivalence? Yes, we do. We have an organization called Indian Sign Language Research and Training Center. It's called ISL-RTC. Now, that these terms exist in ISL. So these words have an ISL signs to it now. Just like to add, in Bangalore, historically, a lot of people used American Sign Language. The reason being, there were a few foreigners who came here, taught ASL, American Sign Language. So there is a lot of ASL influence in Bangalore, that's what I see. So I grew up signing ISL, right? Like when I come here, I do feel a little different signing here, but we also adapt. We also with time, we just adapt, we just communicate. And we also have a Here a Million project in Bangalore, and they work closely with the queer community, and educating about LGBTQIA plus terminologies, explaining them. So there are a lot of videos that the team does. Maybe Charu can add. This is Charu speaking. Yes, we did not have this kind of signs, right, like before. But how did we come up with these signs? The deaf people who have similar experiences, they came up with this science because it's a very new terminologies that the entire society is adapting to, right? Like so, when they came up with the science, we helped them promote that science through making the videos and sharing it to the public.
Your journey into language, because you mentioned you learned your first language at 17. So what did it mean for you up to the age of 17 to not have a language to express yourself? Or also about, school, do deaf people, children not go to school? Do they not learn Hindi or English in schools? What about reading and writing? Was that also something that came to you at 17? And Manju and Hardeep, if you would like to add to that as well.
This is Charu speaking. So my journey of language, my parents were not very shocked that I was deaf because they had experience with my elder sister. My elder sister also was deaf, you could have seen in the movie. Schooling, I was in a hearing school with an inclusive setup. It's like they will have different disabilities, people with learning difficulties, people with other disabilities, and non-disabled children also, all put together in the same classroom. Did I have language 100%? I won't say. Did I have access to the subjects? No. I was thinking, I was comparing my life constantly with the hearing children and the other children, but the challenges that I was having is totally different and unique from them. Also, my sister was deaf, so, I was also able to relate, the deaf side of it while I come back to school. And also, mentioning that I started, when I was in 17th, I almost feel like I woke up to a new, different world. And it did not happen like overnight, right? It was a big process, big thanks to Noida Deaf Society. That's when I actually saw deaf role models, deaf teachers. Because growing up was very difficult, I couldn't learn language, I couldn't learn to write and comprehend like other people. And most of the times I was left alone in the ocean, right? Like I have to fit in, I have to memorize to pass test, but I was not really learning, not really getting that inside my head. So, and then, after seeing all these deaf teachers, role models, then, I took my interest to learn a spoken language like English. And then it happened, I would say that I got better in spoken languages. Also, just to mention, Centum GRO initiative, it was also in the movie. It was founded by Dr. Alim. He was born in India and then he moved to US. US education is far ahead than India. We all know, right? Like we are just catching up to the Western world. So he graduated in US and he came back to India to teach the deaf community here, to empower, to do all these different things, to even talk about like, how the deaf community here is being discriminated. So that's the first time I'm understanding all of these concepts myself. So that was like very new experience. I think Tushar is here and Amal Dev, and we were a team in Smt Charu. And I was the only woman in the Smt Charu. We also had Surabhi, of course, but only deaf woman. So it was a very unique place for me to actually learn. And after the course, I joined them as an instructor myself. And there were a lot of things that I could do. The frustration that I carried, I was able to like channel that through my work in Smt Charu. So we also had Amanda. So her sign is, she's from US. She's white woman from US. She was a great role model for me. She's a deaf woman, right? Like just like me. So her journey greatly inspired me to do what I was doing. So I think I've taken a lot of time talking about my journey, but this is how my life looked. But how did I communicate with my family before any of this happened, right? So it will be like very basic, very limited communication. Like, did you have food? Did you, sleep well? Or, I love you so much. That's all that we spoke in families. My sister and I, we do, because we were like figuring out this language, though it's not complete. We were still visual, we were still communicating better, but not with my hearing members of the family. It was very basic. I couldn't communicate properly. But after the age of 17, like I said, India's Smt Charu happened, and I came back to my family and I was teaching them my sign language. I was teaching them that there is, I can actually communicate everything else, right? So I think it's also like, I believed in my education. When I was in school, I believed that when teachers said that I could only communicate so much, I believed them. But my family also was surprised by my new life of being confident, being independent, being so good in a language. So that all of that changed. My writing skills improved. I changed into a new person. So that happened. Yeah, it was late, but I still learned. Sure. So Charu spoke about her journey. My journey is totally different. I had deaf parents. So I grew up in a family that signed, right? So right from my birth, I was not language deprived or anything. So because I was using my first language, which is Indian Sign Language, to communicate. But again, I had different challenges, because when I go into deaf schools, I see deaf children not using sign language like me, because they had hearing parents who did not teach them sign language, who did not give that experience that I had. So I did not actually have competent peers that I grew up with which shared my language. So that was a little different. But when I joined a deaf school, like I mentioned, the experience was different, because their language acquisition was totally different from me. They were deaf children just like me, but they were not taught ISL. So I was, relatively different from them. So I was still not feeling very comfortable, about my language. Also, the teachers only spoke. I did not come from that environment, totally, different. So, and the other children also, they cope up with it because they had hearing parents. So they were learning a little bit of speech and everything. So I was left out, right? Like growing up was very difficult at that point in time. After my 12th standard, I couldn't really focus on subjects or learn anything. So college, I joined NISH, which is the National Institute of Speech and Hearing in Trivandrum. That's when I actually meet people like me who had deaf parents, right? Like who had ISL as their first language. So that really changed my life, where I get to communicate and do all of that. And I also met Charu, I think, in one of the events in Kerala. So so meeting role models like her and all the other people who had very strong foundation in ISL, that's my journey to language. And when I also joined the ISL RTC course, where I learned ISL, after my college, I realized that the system is entirely in reverse. Adults should not be taught Indian Sign Language. Deaf adults should not be taught Indian Sign Language. It should happen with the children. It should happen with, the schooling, start of the schooling. So this entire system was in reverse. So that really shook me, like, why are you teaching sign language to adults? So yeah, that's my journey to language. I think it has to change. It has to start from the kids. Deaf kids should have access to ISL. This is Hadip speaking. Yeah, so like they had different journeys. I also had a different journey. Like I had deaf parents, so I think you might think Manju and me share a very similar story, but actually it's not. So my parents signed ISL, right? But I did not grow up signing ISL because my parents did not encourage me to sign. See, the society, there's no much awareness. They also had a very difficult life of navigating through this hearing world, just knowing sign language, right? So they've thought that, I shouldn't teach my child sign language and give the same experience that I had. Maybe I should teach him how to speak. Maybe I should make him, fit in the hearing world better than me. Right? Because that's what their impression was. So they also know a little bit of speech. So they did never sign to me. They only try to speak. Growing up, I was not actually exposed to sign language like Manju. So Manju had a different experience. Even in schools, right? I couldn't be able to follow what the teachers were saying. The subjects like mathematics, very visual, I'm able to understand a little bit, make logic into it. But what about English? What about science? I was not really able to, make sense any of it, just memorize it, pass the exams and move on. But I never really understood the subjects. And after I think I grew up, I think in my grade 5, while I was so basic, right? I will only sign fan, I will only know a little bit of vocabulary. Very, very limited vocabulary, I was so left out, so back from my peers at school. And I found very hard to cope after my grade 5. Right? That's when my parents realized, this is really not working out. And what we thought is not true. And then they they put me in a deaf school where they used ISL. And they started, let's make Hardeep learn sign language. But it happened, much later in my life. But I think the important key for deaf people to succeed is sign language is the way for them to express themselves in a visual language. So in India, many deaf children are language deprived, especially in rural areas. There's no enough information, there's no enough awareness in the society. Hearing people just think, somehow we should make them speak. But that also lead them to the deaf children to have language deprivation, right? So this has to change. And especially COVID, we all changed to the digital world, right? That's when the deaf community also came together with all these videos, explaining things. So that was a major shift for every society, every community. So a lot of things, a lot of new things are happening. So future looks bright.
There's a very interesting use of sound and silence. And what was your thinking behind it or feeling? How did you choose to make certain parts absolutely silent and music and audio?
Actually, my initial plan was to keep all the sign language parts silent and not have voiceover, which I did actually. And the first draft of the film had all the signing parts which was silent, and my idea was that I want everybody who's viewing it to have a similar kind, or maybe hearing people also to experience what it feels like to be in a deaf world, partly. So I did that, but it had to be subtitled obviously, so there was a lot of talking and all of it was subtitles. So a lot of people who saw the film said it's hard to look at the people who are signing if you're constantly reading so much. So then the need of a voiceover came, but I still wanted some parts at least. I wanted in some parts people to be able to feel what it is, to have a similar experience like a deaf person. So, like in the beginning, Hardeep starts with his sign language poetry. So I've only seen American Sign Language poetry, and there, whenever the deaf speaker comes and introduces themselves, there will be an interpreter, and the interpreter will introduce will translate the introduction part of it. But once they start to do the poetry, a leaflet is usually handed out. People can read the poem, and while the deaf person is performing the song or the poem, that is not translated, that's not interpreted, because you're supposed to look at the deaf person, and their poetry is visual poetry, so you have to be able to look at them without any other input. So I wanted it to be very close to that experience. So I thought about it, and there is a little bit of sound design in the beginning when he's walking in, like on that bridge, and that was like a dramatic effect to get you into it. And because when you hear that kind of a sound and it goes off, that's when you notice silence. So that was my idea, and since it was a long poem and I couldn't just put so much text in the beginning, so I broke it into parts and would pause it, and then the text would appear, and then Hardeep would sign. So that was one part where I wanted it to be silent, and that idea of having a voiceover for a poem never occurred. Then Charu begins, the initial part of her conversation is also silent, until there is one point in the film where music is introduced, which is the title of the film. After that, I thought, okay, now you've had that experience a little bit, and now is the time where I can make it a little bit comfortable for you. You're like, as a viewer, you're drawn into it perhaps, and now you can just look at the signers and have like the aid of a voiceover to help you be comfortable, like, and comfortably watch the film. But then when Hardeep comes back towards the end, by then you've already seen a lot of sign, and he's also a performer. Hardeep is Charu and Surbhi are the thread that run through the film, but Hardeep and the other three performers, the other three who are hearing, are people who are expressing in their own language. Like the drag queen is doing what the drag queen does, and the theatre performer is doing. So I thought Hardeep, I shouldn't do a voiceover for Hardeep, and his part should be left, like he should be. And by then you're also, as a viewer, I'm expecting you to have made some connection with sign language. So that is again one part where I made it silent. So that was, ideally I would have left the whole film. There would have been sound design, but voiceover is not something that I was very, very happy about, but I guess, I had to, yeah, my journey with sign language. So I was, before I started making films, I used to work in an NGO where I was teaching children. They were, all hearing children. It's 140 boys. It was a home for children who were rescued. And so 3 of my students there were deaf, and they were around the age of 15, 16. And so the organization told me that you don't really have to teach them. You can give them these puzzles, games, coloring, whatever. Like, keep them busy, or just give them some work to do. But there's nothing to teach. So I said okay, but I thought maybe that there must be something that I can do with them, and so I started teaching them basic alphabet, how to time and basic math. And then I was googling. This was 2012, and I googled how to teach deaf kids. So I came across sign language, because before that I had never met a deaf person in my life, and I thought all deaf people just know how to communicate with each other. I didn't know that there was a unique Indian sign language, or sign language is something that one has to learn. It didn't occur to me. So once I found out, then that's when I found out about Noida Deaf Society, where Charu actually learned. So I went with my 3 students, got them enrolled at Noida Deaf Society, and I saw the deaf teachers signing there and was quite fascinated by the language. And I wanted to learn the language. Just to, that time I wasn't making movies. For many, many years after that, I wasn't making movies, but I learned the language because I was very fascinated by the language, and I wanted to learn, just like that, just like you learn any other language. But no other reason.
I think Surabhi or Charu said how sign language is so direct. There is no waffling, there is no scrambling around, it's just very direct. So I wondered, in your experience with deaf women too, talking about abuse, talking about different kinds of violence on women. In the feminist community, we have spent a lot of time with words. What every word means, what terminology means. There's a lot of politics behind whether we should say rape or whether we should say sexual assault. How should it be in the law, so on and so forth. But how different is it in the deaf community women who are experiencing violence. What is the kind of terminology and language that has been the most helpful for you?
Thank you for the question. So there are a lot of different perspectives when it comes to language, right? And also you mentioned that sign language is very direct. That's true. And not every deaf people have that experience, same experience, right? Like of knowing these words or being aware and talking this out openly. So how do they express if something, a serious topic like this, when you're talking about rape, we speak easily, right? Like that one word has a lot of understanding because we know the word, we have that vocabulary in us. How does a deaf person who doesn't know what the word means will explain? He or she might explain like what really happened, right? Enactment, explaining through enactment. That's how the deaf community mostly express this kind of abuse and other things, but they never existed like a particular word like how spoken language has. So we do have these words in the deaf community also, but nobody understood this. Right? They didn't actually understood what these words mean. So that's when DWT comes in, explaining and making these conversations happen in the community. Making videos about this. What does this word mean? And then making people also understand these terminologies. Do you want to also add more? So yeah, to Charu's point. For example, the sign for privilege, the word privilege, they never had an ISL equivalent for it, right? So now there is a sign for privilege. But how did this happen? Right? Like after explaining what does this word actually mean through videos and educating the community of this new word, new vocabulary. Now we are using privilege more often. So that's how this language is getting built in the deaf community.
What are the kind of alliances you think we must build between the deaf community, hearing community, activists, disabled rights? I mean, who exactly, and how should we go about building these alliances? I mean, what are the things we need to be conscious about? What alliances have worked, what have not worked so well? How do we do it? Because I think there are a lot of people interested, but I think we are also grappling with something very new and some sort of, if you could share your thoughts on that.
This is Hardeep speaking. So we saw in the movie the identity of someone is very important, right? We also had a lot of identities. Some people identify themselves as an artist, as a dancer, as a woman, right? So representation matters. And most of the movies that have a deaf representation is done by a hearing actor. Is it accurate? I don't think so, because it's not actually someone who used that language as a native language and who had this similar experience. We don't have enough representation in the society. I think more movies. This one is a great example of what it would actually look like if you actually include people from the community. This is Charu adding more. Yeah, the word ally has a lot of different interpretation. So what is an ally to us? Like, for the deaf women too organization, we wanted to make it a one-stop platform for all deaf people to come and express themselves, especially women, right? Can we change the entire world by just, taking all the deaf women inside an organization. No, we really can't. We need partners. We need to partner with all different people. Like, I think the entire ecosystem has to come. And that is how this gets built. Allyship is important. So did we make this movie with deaf people themselves? No. We had hearing people, we had performers, we had sound engineers, we had editors who worked in this. Not all of them are deaf. Without this partnership, this could have never happened. I think inclusion is about like respecting everyone, including everyone, and not excluding, right? Like, so if the change has to happen, it only will happen by this partnership with all different people in the ecosystem. I think that's very important for and the other thing is, like, usually the hearing society decides on what the deaf people need, deaf community needs. You need interpreter? Okay, have interpreter. Every single meeting you will have an interpreter. What do you want? Right? Like, so they decide, they assume this is what deaf people want. Okay, they need captions, add captions. No, please ask the deaf people. That's not the right partnership. You should understand this world, you should understand the community. That happens only with immersion. It's, just an example, it's like an ocean, right? Like, from outside it all looks same. When you go actually understand what it is, then you will be able to like really be an ally. Maybe many of you might have seen sign language, how sign language works today, and you could have maybe surprised today, right? Like, so this is how it starts, and we here warmly welcome you to join our community. Come, make friends, learn. Let's partner. This is Manju adding. See, that inclusion is very important. So many people think, okay, sign language interpreters, they are the solution to the deaf people. But deaf people have specific needs. Not every deaf person is the same. Not every deaf person uses interpreters. Not every deaf person uses captions. Right? Like, so it really depends on the person. Partnership means asking that person what they really need. So that's my perspective.
Beyond that we are taking a person in, for more than, for the context, for our surroundings, for the situation. And body language is something that we all speak through instinctively. It's not just words, I think, communication. So how is that journey of, maybe if a hearing person is used to words and getting conditioned to a world of words and connecting them, putting them together in sentences, how is it for that hearing person to, experience this sudden wholesomeness of communicating more fully, and vice versa? I would say it's not.
That's a beautiful question. It is like a whole new way of looking at the world. It's all other spoken languages have a certain kind of grammar and a certain way we think or look at the world in. But this is a visual language, so it requires you to shift the way you think and imagine, like try and describe everything visually, even though you don't have the vocabulary for it. But like it really forces you to simplify what you're trying to say and be clear and concise. The most important thing when you're signing, when we're so used to listening and we take it for granted, and sometimes we're not even looking at the person who we are talking to. Often we're not looking at the person we're talking to, and we don't know whether the other person is really listening or not. Here, if you want to communicate with somebody, you have to really look at the person. You can't not look at them. So that is the most basic, the most fundamental difference that is there between, when you're signing for communication, you have to make eye contact in order to communicate with the other person. So that is that was the first thing. And then how it is to experience that, actually, I don't know, it's a personal, like I'm sure everybody will have a different answer to that, but I'm not a great speaker. I often take a lot of time to articulate what I'm trying to say. I have to edit. That's why film or any kind of medium which allows me to edit and look at it and work on it again and then be comfortable with, okay, this is what I really want to say, that works for me. But when I learned sign language, And also I was very underconfident. I'm not saying that sign language made me a more confident person, but it did, I used to, this NGO where I used to work, they used to have theatre workshops for children. And in the beginning I would see children who were very shy and, would hesitate to talk to other kids. By the end of the theatre workshop, they felt more comfortable with their bodies and they felt a little bit more confident. So theatre does that to you. In a similar way for me, I won't say that sign language does that to everybody, but I think I became much more comfortable with using gestures and in general just became more comfortable with my body and more confident about it, if that makes sense. But that was my experience.
My question is to Hardeep. I know that the two women, Charu and Manju, are working mostly with people who, working within the deaf community, or people who are inclusive, understand inclusion, and they have a community that, of deaf people around them. Hardeep, I suppose you work at MAP, as we just discussed prior to the film screening, and you work in inclusion. I know you're, helping them to understand the needs of persons with disabilities and how they can be accessible, etc. I'm just wondering that, you're working in an environment where there may not be other deaf people with you. So how confident do you feel working without, people from the deaf community? And if, your presence there has brought any changes among the visitors and among the team itself? Thank you.
Two questions, very interesting. Thank you for those questions. Yeah, do I work alone in MAP? Yes, sometimes it's difficult to navigate this entire city by myself, going in the metros, going in public. I'm also very introverted, so it was very difficult for me initially to just move into the city and work, navigate that environment by myself. But also, people there are very interested to learn ISL and to communicate with me. So that is the game changer. We also like text. We also use written communication to talk. And we also have other people with disabilities work with me at MAP. So my journey with MAP, I just joined as an intern for 3 months, and then we had a lot happening in the deaf community after I joined. So like I said, I joined as an intern for 6 months in the inclusion department. So ever since I joined, I gave my inputs of how we can make things accessible. MAP was already more accessible, I would say, but I was also like adding a lot of value to that team. Like for example, there is an artwork, right? Like there's also a very comprehensive English summary of that artwork, right? Like now Manju was mentioning about language deprivation. Now, many millions of deaf children, deaf people in India are not having a good acquisition of English language. So how do they understand this artwork? So something that we're working on is translating them into ISL. The MAP team is working with different organizations, partnering with different organizations to make this translated into ISL. We have done a lot of videos. We are all still, many projects are a work in progress. But after I joined, after I gave this input, they gave me the opportunity to manage this, of making the art more accessible for deaf community through adding ISL. So a lot of things coming up, but that's one where I added value. So this is Dr. Alim speaking. That have you done these videos? Is it somewhere where I can go and see? This is Hardeep answering. Thank you for the question. The last September, International Week of the Deaf People and International Day of Sign Languages. So that's when we partnered with Hear a Million team. Hear a Million team is also a deaf-focused, deaf-led organization, like deaf-led initiative. So what we did was, we had interpreters do the walkthrough in the museum, right? Like someone was like understanding all the art, so they were explaining this artwork with the help of ISL interpreters to many deaf visitors. So that's something we have already done. So this is Dr. Ali, I'm asking this question. Just asking Hadip to repeat the question because I couldn't properly see. What is the long-term vision, long-term impact of MAP is your question, right? Okay. So what is the long-term vision? So we have the deaf community. We also have art here, that the company I work for. So we always bring in interpreters, right? Like every time there is a new exhibition launch, every time there is a walkthrough, we have interpreters for access so that deaf people enjoy art in its own way. So that's the plan, long-term plan to make art accessible. So there are a lot of associations, a lot of organizations that work for people with disabilities, and we have a lot of people here also. So I work for MAP. We also have Shailesh who's here, who heads the inclusion department for Museum of Art and Photography. You're welcome to talk to them. Welcome to talk to Niharika. Please ask your questions after the session. And there are a lot of interesting people here, so you please meet them, ask your questions.